Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Perspectives. We are well and truly into 2025, and B2B tech leaders face an ever-evolving landscape. We now have AI-driven decision-making, shifting buyer expectations, all with a backdrop of economic volatility. In this episode, we sit down with Chip Royce of Flywheel Advisors to break down the biggest challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead. We'll explore how CEOs, CMOs, and CROs can build resilience, scale efficiently, and drive real impact without getting lost in the noise of short-term trends. So without further ado, let's get into it. Chip, welcome. How the devil are you, sir?
I am wonderful. Great to see you, Reggie. Happy 2025.
Yes, and a very happy 2025 to you as well. Now, for those very few people who don't know who you are, Chip, we're going to get straight into it. We've got some great questions and things lined up. Why don't you tell all those wonderful people out there who you are and a little bit more about Flywheel, and we'll just dive straight in afterwards. Go for it.
Thanks, Reggie. That's awesome. I don't expect everybody to know who I am. I tend to be one of those guys who lurks in the shadows. But it's great to meet everybody. My name is Chip Royce. I have a firm called Flywheel Advisors. I'm based here in the United States in North Carolina. But I've had a really interesting career at the intersection of business, B2B, and the internet. I started my career early on when the first web browser came out. And sort of have latched on helping first my employers, and that was everything from startups to the Fortune 50, figure out how to commercialize and build businesses, acquire customers, and do service delivery through the internet, mostly in a B2B setting. And that's included the PC industry, software as a service, et cetera. But in 2014, I started Flywheel Advisors. After the third time that employer asked me to move to Beijing, and frankly, my family was just not geared for that kind of adventure. And when I started Flywheel Advisors, I just was in a novel place in the industry. I was able to take a really unique set of circumstances and experiences and help growing and scaling mostly software as a service, but some hardware and some deep tech technology companies, and help them grow and scale. So if you unpack that, that's companies that are probably of $2 to $5 million in revenue up to about $100 million. But frankly, that sounds like success, but often that road is filled with a lot of challenges. And I love helping them build go-to-market strategies and build the operations and partnerships underneath that so that they can avoid risk and basically sleep well at night, that they've got a fantastic business.
Sounds wonderful, Chip. Absolutely brilliant. Well, look, let's dive straight in. 2025, my goodness, what a year already. And the tech leaders, I mean, certainly you found this as well, I'm sure. They're facing amazing challenges right now. It never stays still in the B2B tech space, especially. But now we're facing different types of challenges. We've got these AI-driven decision-making processes going on. We've got things that used to work, or traditional go-to-market sort of strategies have all been turned on their head. And all of this with a bit of a backdrop of a little bit of economic uncertainty, depending on which market you're in. In terms of what you're finding out there, do you see that shift? Are traditional B2B kind of growth models failing? Are they shifting? Can people still rely on those kind of legacy sales and marketing techniques that we're using before? What are you finding out there, Chip?
I think the way you started off hit it beautifully. 2025 is going to be a year of change. If you feel that you have a set formula and expect that to work for the entire year, I'm concerned for you. I think that you need to think and be prepared and have either plans in a drawer for change, or be ready and have metrics and information and the right people around you to be ready to pivot, deal with a setback. So much is happening. I mean, look at it. We're a week in. And case in point, if you have the U.S. government as a customer, for instance, and one of my clients does,
Right.
And I feel so badly. But 2 days ago, they and their customers both get funded by grants. And there was risk that their revenue pipeline was immediately going to get hit. And of course, there's all sorts of downstream impacts that come from that. And that was just one relatively small factor in the big picture of macroeconomics.
It's having an impact, definitely. And I think these are outside forces over and above what businesses do day to day. If they're selling their SaaS software, the buyers are certainly looking at those, as you rightly say, all those different things that are having an impact. So just shifting a little bit, where do you think, how do you feel about the revops, the revenue operations, and integrating with sort of go-to-market strategies? Do you see that as a way forward, or do you think that that's something, have you, in your experience, have you always found that? Do you try and sort of integrate those things together, or how does that work for you, Chip?
Great question. I love the term revops, and for those who aren't familiar with it, revenue operations. And in today's 2025 version of this, it's the systems that you use to both run and measure your marketing and sales. So that can be everything from your Google Ads and systems that you use to go outbound to customers, all the way to tools like your CRM that help you measure your sales performance, all the way to executing contracts like your DocuSign, and all the way through. So Reggie, your question's a great one, because you could sort of say, oh, that's infrastructure. There are a lot of companies that have done various steps of that by the seat of their pants, or they've taken these different tools and run them in disconnected ways. And one of the best ways I like to describe it is, and I challenge every company I speak with and the client to say, do you have a unique identifier in all your systems that maps to that one customer? And 95% of the time they don't, because the systems were never built or deployed in a way that does that.
Sure.
I guess I was really fortunate, as I said, to have worked with a couple big Fortune 50 companies that had that discipline that you never set those systems up unless you put that kind of discipline in place where those information connects are. And frankly, you anticipate, maybe because it's a second or third order effect, that you need to have every step measured, every step have a system, because if you don't, you're going to have a gap when the problems come up. This comes back to your first question, right? Absolutely. And then you'd go, it's going to take us 2 months just to compile the data to figure out the solution to the problem. So let's go full circle. The short answer to your question is, RevOps is a requirement. I don't think you can launch a business without the solid underpinnings and infrastructure, because to go back and get it set, to fix it, usually burns too much time and capital and can set your business back even farther.
Absolutely. You make some very, very strong points. And also, I would say, and certainly something that I've found when I've been talking to CEOs and CMOs and also head of revenue, that the term go-to-market seems to have changed beyond recognition. I mean, I'm finding that, go-to-market 5 years ago, as was, and you've seen the sort of bow tie model, right? You've seen that which is wonderful by Jacko over there in the Netherlands. And I think that so many people and organizations like Pavilion sort of are really pushing that particular model. But with AI coming into play and all these new kind of outreach models that are coming out, and cold outreach that are beginning to sort of take play with companies like Clay coming into the...
Let's introduce inbound led outbound. That's a great term. And for those of you who don't know it basically means you got to use marketing to drive leads so that your people can outbound. Go figure. We actually did that in 1980 and 1990.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all joined up. Anything linear, as you're saying, as you're rightly sort of pointing to, is never going to work. One size doesn't fit all. But in your experience, number one, what does go-to-market mean to you? today? And has it changed? Is it still kind of, so many people are saying it's not fit for purpose, or it's changed. It's people use it as a throwaway line. And you've got companies who are on, say, 10 million annual recurring revenue using go-to-market models or strategies used by companies like HubSpot, for $100 million businesses, and they're wondering why things aren't working. Just touch on go-to-market for a little bit.
I like distilling these things down to their simpler form. And frankly, just like I joked about inbound led outbound, nothing's really new. It's just a different twist on how we've done things, and often enabled by different experiences, technologies, or customer preferences. So I guess, and maybe it's too simplistic. Maybe some of the smarter guys will tell me, Chip, you got it all wrong. But to me, go-to-market is fundamentally a way of just saying, hey, look, this is how we structure that process, from starting the awareness, the first touch, or letting people know that we have something that we have to sell, to facilitating the delivery of what we do, our product or service, and possibly even a renewal if it's a subscription type offering. And just say, and look at what are those activities necessary to do that really well. And my little version of that is to put a lens and say that every single one of those steps is driven through the needs and the interaction with the customer. Again, Absolutely. It might be too simplistic, but my thinking is if you take that structure, the other pieces fall into place much more simply, rather than injecting but there's a complication there. Of course there's complications, but they're sometimes over construed and almost fabricated, when again, it's all about delighting a customer. If there's a complication to the customer, go solve that.
No, absolutely. And you touched on some great points there. I'm just trying to unpack those. That number one, companies try and overcomplicate things. You need to really bring it down to its nub, to its simplistic level. And that's some of the hardest things to do, is that some of the best things are the simplest things. But to get to that point, that pure, brutal element of base level simplicity, it's like asking a business, what is it they actually do? And asking the board, and you get 7 different answers.
Yeah. And I think I'll throw two different topics I know we wanted to cover today into the mix. And I think they're both due to technology. But I think, when technology executives were given Google and the ability to say, look, I'm not an expert in sales, marketing, customer support. I might even been a software coder, but I've now ended up as the CEO of a company. Wow, I can go on Google and say, I've got a challenge finding indirect partners. Google, what should I do? And then accidentally they get given a roadmap that they decide they're going to go try execute. That's number one, and we can peel back the layers. But then, oh wow, there are these AI tools. Either somebody who is really smart mapped out a process and said, I can now automate this and give you a tool that has all of my knowledge, or let you take the information you got over here that already might be sketchy or incomplete, but now we can put in an AI and give it complete control over a step. It's the search for a panacea rather than experience and a little bit of hard work that sometimes I think trips people up.
Oh, goodness me. This is a yin and yang, Chip. We are, it's so true. The amount of organizations I've walked into where, I walked into an organization once, and their whole strategy was based on not their whole strategy, part of their product launch was based on a ChatGPT answer that almost gave them they put in probably the wrong prompts, and they had everything from the wrong total addressable market to everything else. And you remember, these tools are scraping thousands of bits of data trying to understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah, but they sound so smart. It is so easy to be convinced that these are the right answers. I've played around with the tools, and I've sort of had it try to write an article for me or whatever. And I go, this sounds so good, but you have to step back and peel it back and say, would a rational person agree with this?
Yeah.
Other than the window dressing.
100%. And I think we are seduced by technology. We are, and the higher up the food chain that you go, and you talk to the board, they have shareholders or investors that they need to appease, who are always saying, what is our AI strategy? Do we have one? If not, bake one in. What are we going to do? Why aren't we using agents? Because they read something in Forbes at the weekend or something on Bloomberg.
Yeah.
Or they met somebody at a CEO roundtable or whatever it might be. And there's always this feeling that the guys next door are doing better or they're ahead, when really bringing things down to a base level and actually just saying, do you know what your core value proposition is?
Yeah.
Well, you know what it was 2 years ago. What is it today? Do you know who your ideal customers are and where they actually live? Because those are the things, to your point, Chip, that are the hardest things to define, because they take brain power. They take people like you and I really sitting with people in a cold room and giving them frameworks and giving them help to try and get to these things. So many people just won't do it. They'll try very quickly to get to the quick, shiny new object. And I'm finding that a hell of a lot more now with AI, sort of really in generative AI. If I use that terminology, where people can just, it's Google on steroids, and Gemini itself is now becoming more and more powerful in terms of what it's doing. But yes,
but it's funny, every one of these new tools, and I love it, and I'm seduced. I mean, I can't wait to race out and try it. Thank gosh they have free trials, and you don't actually have to pony up the money, because I would be the sucker who would be in for $60 like that, or at least a month's worth. And I guess, because I had mentioned earlier, like I've always been worried about the brand. I've been always worried about what could break. I'm just a little bit leery about letting, and it started with email sequences. So, when CRMs used to say, hey, would you like to set up this email sequence? And trust me, we'll pause if somebody replies back. Well, here's the flaw of that very basic automation technology. What if they called on the phone and you didn't log it?
Yeah.
You're now sending a reminder email to somebody you had a great conversation with, might be a motivated buyer, but you've completely messed up the relationship with that activity. Now you take it to the AI, where you're saying, okay, I've just replaced 3 salespeople, which are human, imperfect, yes, but they also have pattern recognition to know when, or be able to inject extra information, and they live in our modern world, right? They live in the outside world, outside of the computers. They know if they saw somebody at a cocktail party or an industry event, and know when to put the brakes and when not to send that email. And the fact that people turn things over to me is actually scary. So I've adopted a philosophy of Copilot. And fortunately, some services are enabling what I like here, and they're sort of human input steps. So instead of going, I'm going to program an AI to do A, B, C, D.
Yes.
It might be, I'm going to prepare A, ask you to review it. Do B, say, do you want me to do C? Because I know something might happen between B and C. And to me, that's a value add for a couple of reasons. One is, the tool's not worth it if the time saved by it doing A, B, C, or D is worthwhile. But if it is worthwhile and it gives me the ability to exercise the human judgment, that's pretty interesting. I just now have an executive assistant or a marketing assistant who is adding some value and letting me think at a more elevated level. And that gets pretty exciting. I know I think we all forgot how to use assistants and executive assistants, but I think this is where the technology really could be something special.
That's such a great point. I mean, it's that hybrid human face and that kind of digital sequencing. But when automation first came out, I mean, the second startup I exited was an automated tool. It was managing bids on Google, and it was a whole variety of different things. And one of the most dangerous things with marketing automation, as you say, is this soulless repeating concept. though it's getting a lot clever, far more clever, people know. You just know when you get that email and you've already spoken to that person. You're going, well, what's just happened here? And it's a nightmare. Sometimes it's irrecoverable because it's not authentic anymore, as it once was. So I think that's the big challenge, which brings me on to really just asking about all this pressure on organizations at the moment. What do you think? Are you still finding big disconnects between sales and marketing departments within organizations, and maybe even with product?
I'm seeing two things. It's a great question. It's something I feel, excuse me, I had a little cough there and still getting something in my throat here.
Are you okay? Drink away. I'll join you.
Excuse me. There's sort of two things I run into. The first is something that I learned when I was running a company. One of my clients pulled me in full time as their CEO.
Yeah.
And it was had a conversation about it today, excuse me. But it was a fantastic experience, traumatic possibly, but still a fantastic experience. And it was more about sort of sorting through and sort of building a management philosophy. But I think the first is one, you sort of experience two things. Either you get silos, and that's really dangerous, I think, in today's world.
Yes.
To think that sales and marketing are two different animals is sort of crazy. I've adopted this sort of concept. Remember when you asked about go-to-market?
Yeah.
The translation of a go-to-market strategy to me is something I call full funnel. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'll help my clients map out everything from awareness to those activities that are going to generate a lead, what happens with that lead to qualify it, into the sales organization, and what they're going to do to take that customer through the journey to become potential sale, or hopefully, actually, I love it when a customer self-disqualifies. When a customer says, thank you, you've done a great job. I just have realized this is not for me. Because the opposite is, hey, I've decided I want to buy this. You haven't had to sell me. It's a tremendous experience.
Yes.
But if you leave everybody in silos, what happens when that salesperson goes, I've had an awesome experience with somebody, but they told me something completely differently that motivates them than what we've been putting in our marketing materials. And this is the third time I've heard it this week. They can't turn around to the marketing person and fill them in and say, how are we going to adapt our marketing materials and our website tomorrow and our scripts and all the various things, or go test it at least and go see if this resonates. I think you got real problems, and execution will really, really suffer, especially in the B2B standpoint. I think the second, and it's a corollary to that, is the founder-led sales activities. This has come up like 5 times this week. I think you and I spoke early when we were reconnecting. I was speaking on LinkedIn with a very prolific recruiter, and they sort of came out of left field about executives who don't want to hire people. They want to hire mentors and advisors because they won't let go. And they sometimes call it, founder-led sales is one of the terms. But there was the Paul Graham article that was so prolific, founder mode. Right? Which says it's okay. You don't have to become a big company. You can just stay a founder and be this sort of single icon kind of leader. And I think a lot of good things can come from it because you keep that vision, you keep that consistency, but I have no clue how a company is going to scale if they stay in that kind of structure. It's baffling to me. I think you're going to get stuck if you can't separate the vision from finding the right people, even if you have been burned in the past, who can help you execute and be specialists. So I sort of fall in a middle ground between that situation. Yes, I think the founders have to learn how to delegate and find people to fill the roles. But as an advisor, as a fractional executive, I think we are a great bridge to help them figure out those systems and processes and the working formula so that they can eventually hire in the right person full time and do that.
I think so. I think one of the things I always find myself doing is saying to a CEO, you've got to get out your own way. If you want to grow, you've kind of got to but the things that we encourage them to do is to get out from behind the desk but channel that energy into being more socially active in terms of actually doing things like podcasts, doing things like all these other things, rather than going on demos and trying to be the big guy, jumping up and down and doing, it's still in their blood, especially if they come from a sales background or even a marketing background. They want that. They love that fix of the deal.
Sure.
But the fix of the deal now, as you say, the founder-led sales can be potent if channeled in the right way. And I think
so I love that. And I would agree. If the person's an extrovert and is the deal maker, I can totally see that. And that's, I think they can feel comfortable staying in the visionary role.
Sure.
But what do you do? What would be your advice, Reggie, for those people who are the introvert, the technical founder who's only learned to be extroverted as a survival mechanism, but that's just not in their DNA?
That's, again, a brilliant question. I think that one of the things that we've found is that when you've got more introverted, geeky type of CEOs who've driven that company through, and some of the big guys as well, they get media trained, they get all this sort of stuff, but they just can't take it to the next level. Mm-hmm. And what we find is that we get them writing more in-depth white papers, going to universities, and sort of talking to people they're comfortable with, doing non-video-based podcasts, so very audio-based, but having really good questions and really strong, a strong narrative that helps them tell their story and get into what they're really into. Because believe it or not, if you look at that percentage of what makes a sale, sometimes it can be when, if there's 14 people in a decision-making process, in a buying-making process, and 2 or 3 of them are techie, and they hear that CEO talking to them, guess what? The vote is going to go that way. So Absolutely. That's why we need different people to be involved in these different things. And so you've got this, and I think there's a lot of strength there. I used to work for Ziff Davis, and their byline used to be, "We believe in technology," and their sort of subheading was that the geek shall inherit the earth. And in many ways, they're true. Personality goes a long way, but if it doesn't have substance, which these guys and girls have, who've actually built the thing and built the things that we use every day, and they're so passionate about it, that comes across in different ways. And I think that, and they seem to be the exception, not the rule nowadays, because everyone, when you're talking to a board or talking to investors, or you've got a shareholder meeting and somebody's sort of quite geekish, it ain't never going to happen. But there's plenty of things that they can do, and there's plenty of different ways in which they can be, their talents can be sort of expunged in wider areas. So I think it's absolutely, it's a team effort, isn't it? No one person ever creates anything. So what do you feel as well, Chip, about leadership, creating communities, and about actually creating, because I think one of the things that I'm finding a lot more is, if you are a CEO, you like the company of other CEOs, but you also like to maybe meet aspiring CEOs so you can share some info, but also meet some more talented CEOs. So I'm not talking about non-exec directors or people just sort of parachuted into organizations. How do you feel? Have you ever had the opportunity to build a community around a particular product or a technology to help sort of take it to market, get deeper penetration with the end user base, or to maybe even make it influence?
What you're talking about, I feel very strongly about. I haven't myself yet. Mm-hmm. I've done online sports communities, right? But that was the product itself, was the community. But I think in today's B2B world, so if you don't mind, let me just step back 100,000 feet, and I think it'll connect the dots. I think today's B2B buyer is so worried and guarded about being spammed, right? People have abused LinkedIn. They've abused email. Their companies don't want bad email coming through, et cetera. That people are guarded. Okay, so how do you get your message across? I think you have to get so super niche and so close that I can say, I understand your problem, right? And it's not to say, for instance, if I have an email AI tool, that I understand the challenges of a modern B2B salesperson today. Okay, that's good, right? But why me? How do I know you can fix my problem? If you can get down to, if this person is a salesperson for roofing materials to large home builders, right? If you can say, we have a tool that is proven to help other salespeople of roofing materials just like you to other large home buyers, that message is going to go through and they're going to say, prove it. Yeah. You know, I'm going to get competitive intel. You're de-risking my job. You're making my life easier. Okay, so how do you do that? Now you say, why did Chip go through all this stuff, right? Well, I think your legitimacy isn't just going to be, I said I could do that, right? It's having the customers, it's having the testimonials. And frankly, I think it's finding ways to get to where those roofing material companies, those home builders are, and being part of their world. And especially in the post-COVID experience where we're all working out of unique places and it's not your traditional structures, you know, I think people are starting to slowly embrace going to conferences more because at least that's where they want to be an extrovert. They want to build the relationships. I think the online communities, hopefully we're going to see a next version of the post-Discord and Slack communities. I think they've sort of died off a little bit, but I think finding ways where you're adding value and enriching people and building relationships, I think they're going to be important. And last but not least, I mentioned LinkedIn already, but some really weird things have happened the past couple months where I think they're making it even harder for us to see what our colleagues are posting and get our own messages out. So the more I think we can have control over that, I think as marketers, as salespeople, as executives or people with careers or services that they'd like to offer to others, I think we need to have control of it and figure out how to communicate it.
Yeah, no, that's very, very, very powerful points there, Chip. And I think that, LinkedIn, wow. You know, I don't know whether I'm looking at LinkedIn, Instagram, or TikTok sometimes. They seem to blend into one. There's so much video content.
Guilty as charged. I actually did my first.
No, absolutely.
So let me walk you through the logic, right? I'm sitting here. In fact, my daughter burned me on it today. She goes, I saw your video popped up, and I'm like, oh no. She's a consultant in Atlanta, and long story short, I had bought in and built a LinkedIn newsletter, and then I posted that content again to try to share that idea a different way as a regular text post. And I was just amazed. I wasn't getting the number of impressions, the visibility that I used to get for similar kinds of content. And everybody's saying, look, video is what LinkedIn's, putting their weight behind. And if you create a video, it'll go out. So I essentially recorded similar to how we are now, a 1.5 minute little soundbite of the article, seeing what we get picked up. Now, jury's out because I just put it out today, but it's weird that we're going to have to do these things in order to effectively get the message out.
It's a very generational thing as well. I think that you touched on something earlier that I just wanted to just came up when we were talking about LinkedIn. There's a whole generation, a millennial, dare I say, use that term, generation, which are very comfortable. They grew up the internet. They didn't sort of discover it and say, what's this crazy new thing? And they look at the kind of weird flip phones that we used to have back in the day. And it's kind of like, what is that? Where's the screen? Why is the screen so small? But they are very comfortable using Slack, WhatsApp, all those kind of different channels and messaging and various other things. So they're very active on that. And I was reading somewhere, I think it was Google data, that's saying that now millennials make up, I think 48% of all B2B buying decisions. So they're very comfortable with that, even though the weighting is still sort of like an older demographic. But it's getting old. They're not kids anymore.
They're controlling the buying purchase, even if they don't have executive authority. They're controlling the
They're
process.
controlling absolutely. So you need to go where, I suppose, where people are, but also it's never one piece of content. The touch points are so varied. So you've got people using Reddit, people using a whole variety of different things, but the closed groups is really where the magic happens. I think when you what we were just talking about. If you create that community, you control the narrative, and you control the narrative in terms of what people want to talk about. So for me, it's gone full circle. I was talking about working for Ziff Davis. We launched an enterprise magazine here in the UK called IT Week, which competed against Computing and Computer Weekly, which were big enterprise titles. And one of the first things that the editors did to try and get some, the two incumbents there, was to hold these kind of evening dinners, supper clubs, where you would get CTOs or CIOs sitting around drinking some fine wine, some red wine, having some meals in some restaurants in Mayfair in London, and bitching about buying servers or doing this or doing that, and the problems that they faced. And it was like gold to the journalists and to the, to really get an insight, to be a fly on the wall. But it was a very safe group. It was very closed. And it was something that good old fashioned journalists did very well, where they had an environment. Nothing was discussed outside those four walls. And you don't have that safety net anymore, because everything you do is filmed, everything you do can be recorded, and before you know it, it's up on Instagram or it's on X or whatever, and suddenly, and you've got to be careful what you say. But in these controlled environments, in these kind of safer environments where people can be open and talk, and all the egos are left at the door, these communities are beginning to become more and more prevalent. And one of the wonderful things that you hear on those communities is, where would you recommend I go to talk to someone about X?
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 people sort of back them up. Guess what? Suddenly that person gets a phone call out of the blue with someone who's ready to buy. They're way above the sort of in the buying cycle. So things like that are so powerful, and they influence so much. So
yes, I was doing. I've been helping one of my clients. In fact, we just launched their product. It's called Quest. It's a very, very specialized piece of survey software for academic researchers. Okay. And one of its neat capabilities is the ability to ask a 5th grader or a 3rd grader survey questions and actually get accurate responses. And you go, well, that sounds interesting, but believe it or not, if you've been out there doing behavioral or social research, you normally had to ask the parents. Why am I telling you this? Well, this is a tough group to reach, right? They're academics. They're usually in universities, or they're running nonprofit organizations that do this kind of research. And I was amazed, coming in being a technologist first and not somebody who's lived in ed tech. As I started working with the client, I'm talking to them saying, okay, what conferences do they go to? And they're like, well, they go to these, but you got to understand, these aren't your normal conferences. I'm like, well, what do you mean? They present papers. Wow. And I'm like, okay, but do they all stand around and drink wine afterwards? Well, yeah. I said, so I get the papers part, but we got to hit the wine part, right? We got to find ways to build relationships. And so, and I'm sorry, Reggie, I totally forgot about you telling me the Mayfair wine part of your story. But what I'm more getting at is that, yes, of course, these people aren't used to having a little trade show area and desks and tables, et cetera. But getting to the meat of it, building the relationship, saying, hey, look, we developed a tool that really works. I can only imagine how difficult it is doing your job. If you ever have the time or willingness, I'd love to demo it for you. I think it creates a tremendous opportunity. And that's a key part of the research. I was going out to the people for the software when we're doing the interviews. And after we asked them, okay, what features and what's your pain point, et cetera, I'd go, okay, what websites do you go to? What podcasts do you listen to? And what conferences do you find, would you expect to, yourself or others to go to that a company could reach you at?
No, absolutely. That's a wonderful example of very hard to reach places where you're just not going to find it. You know, Chat GPT is not going to find those people. And it's not even going to recognize them as not only influencers, but very key decision makers within that buying cycle. And it's not just about, you know, I think you're of a similar, you know, our cloth is cut from the same kind of place. And I think that we, you know, you are genuinely trying to do good. You're genuinely trying to find the right match with the right people in a way that's above board. And let's face it, buyers are in control in 2025. They ain't going to buy something they don't want. And in fact, they've already made the decision on who they're going to be using 6 months ago. So it's that 95-5 rule all over again.
You've actually given me a really interesting insight, because I've always felt that integrity, character is important, right? You're not helping yourself. So the old definition of sales, like I could use a Jedi mind trick to make you do something you don't want to do because I need to sell you something, right? It's always turned me off. So I've always felt myself to be an ethical salesperson.
Yes.
What's interesting, you just described it though. You don't have to worry about being an ethical salesperson if the person is already in charge of the buying process, which is interesting. So as long as you serve them, you're being ethical, which means there's a little bit of weight released. Do you understand the psychological aspect?
Totally.
And now you're freed up to say, okay, I'm just going to find out what turns them on, what motivates them, how can I delight them today and stay with them tomorrow? And I've got actually a simpler job than I had before, even though the rest of the naysayers would turn to you and say, oh my gosh, you're simplifying that. It can't be that easy. It's not, because the person is doing 90% of the lifting. You've got to write the right content. You've got to be at those intercept points to eventually take that phone call when they really care and hope that you can bring it over the line.
I totally agree. And when we used to look at data and where we could get data of touch points along that buyer journey, you would see people going backwards and forwards. And it's really fascinating. It really is fascinating, but you're absolutely right. It's how you look at things. It's what your perception is. A lot of people say, oh my goodness, the buyer's in control and there's these buying committees and there's all these things. Well, guess what? Your life suddenly became a hell of a lot easier if you view it that way. But if you're still using old fashioned techniques of sort of, you know, churn them and burn them kind of thing, using sort of boiler room techniques, you are going to fail, because you're sending sales messages to people, to 95% of people who don't want your service. But if you're educating the 5 or 10% and you're serving them, as you say, and giving them all of that stuff that they're looking for, because they're not even hungry for information. They're hungry for sort of transformation in a way, not even attention. They want something that's going to shift their narrative, that's going to make them go, is this going to solve my problem?
I've met a profound guy. I've known him for 2 years. He's a copywriter. He's a top of funnel copywriter for B2B. He's spent his career in technology and B2B sales. His name is Dean Way. WinstonWrites.com. But I've learned so much from interacting with him about motivations and how it translates to both writing and doing marketing, but also sales and even just building relationships. But one of the profound things is what you just talked about, right? People generally are living in a suboptimal negative present, and it's your job to take them to a positive future.
Yes.
And the other question is how bad is that negative? So I've translated that in the go-to-market aspects to how bad is their negative present? Because if they don't have existential pain, you know, if they aren't going to get shut down because of regulatory issues, if they don't risk going out of business, you're not that compelling of an offering, no matter what you do.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So one, you find the right customers who are worried about going out of business, and then prove that your solution truly solves it and allows them to sleep well at night. Now, all of a sudden, now we're getting a formula, right?
Yes. Yes.
You know, they're in control, we said, is first part of the formula. Second one is they've got to have pain. And third is you've got to be able to not only solve it, but communicate it really well that they get it in their vernacular and in their context.
That is absolutely music to my ears. And I think, Chip, I mean, it's just flown by, and there's so many other things. Maybe we can do a part 2, Chip.
I'd love to.
Because this has been such a fascinating conversation that we're having, and hopefully it resonates with quite a few people out there as well. So, Chip, we're going to be rounding things off, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on here, and it's just great to see your lovely smiling face. And tell me, where can people find out more about you and about Flywheel, and just tell us a bit more about how they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Reggie. I've had a wonderful time as always, and I can't wait to come back if you'll have me.
Absolutely.
My firm is called Flywheel Advisors. It sounds as it's spelled, and or spelled as it sounds. So please feel free to look me up on the web. I'm also on LinkedIn under Chip, CHIP, Royce, ROYCE. And those are the two biggest places I hang out. So if I can ever help anyone, whether it's introductions to great people like Dean who write great copy, to just noodling around some of the things we've talked about or how they could apply to your business, and if it's something I can help with or point you in the right direction, I'd be happy to. So please ping me. I've got an open calendar for 25 minutes on my website, and I'd love to get to know you, see if there's anything I could help with or ways I could guide you.
Wonderful. Chip, thank you very much. I'm going to put all those links and all those points in the show notes. And again, thank you so much. Everybody out there, thanks for tuning in, and see you again soon. I'm Reggie James. This has been Perspectives, and I've been joined by the wonderful Chip Royce. See you again soon. Bye.
Great job. Well done. Thank you.